Hey guys, Michael J. Crawford here, and welcome to part 6 of the Section 31 movie review. Well, as you guys know, I'm not exactly the biggest fan of the Section 31 movie, but I am sure that the upcoming Section 31 comic book will be much better. Hell, I guess it couldn't be any worse. Before I get started today, I do want to address an interesting sentiment from the comments of my last video. Now, Street Preacher, along with Jose Hunter's EWF remixes, didn't seem to appreciate my newly found animated mouth. Street Preacher suggests that the mouth is creepy, while Jose Hunter's EWF remix, Jose, you need a shorter name, buddy. You just do. I'm sorry. But Jose says that maybe creepy is not the best word as much as distracting. So, let me say this. Yes, I put a lot of work into making the mouth animated and all that, and I'm trying to make the production value of this channel as high as possible. But if you guys don't like it, no problem. I will fix it. So, let's do that right now. Okay, Street Preacher, and of course, Jose, is this any better? Do you think this is what you want to see? Less distracting, maybe? Or perhaps should I just stick with the old way? Tell you what, I will switch back to this one all the time if you want to pay me what it costs for this kind of animation, which is more than you're going to want to pay me. Last time, we got one of the most awkward, on-the-nose telegraphs of a future reveal of a mystery character in cinematic history.
Fine. The hard way.
So after Alok stuns Georgiou, shame it was set to stun, really. Anyway, she wakes up apparently surprised that she's not being tortured.
And what delightful place is this?
A safe house, but maybe not so safe for you.
You are Section 31. Why aren't you torturing answers out of me?
Now look, I fully admit that I tend to be a little on the old-fashioned side, but it just seems to me like they're trying to, overhype the sexuality of this show a little bit. I mean, say what you want about Star Trek Discovery, but, Georgiou as a character was portrayed more as sadistic, not masochistic. I don't know why the writers of this show are even doing this. I tried to look up on their IMDb's to see if there's anything they have in common, and I did find that all but one of the writers did work on a show called Rain, but I don't know anything about that show. Yeah, I'm sure it's just another sci-fi show. What's even more baffling to me, however, is not that Georgiou is apparently turned on by being tortured. It's Alok's response to her question.
Why aren't you torturing answers out of me?
You're a tyrant. A real one. Torture wouldn't work.
Just to be clear, the 3 red turds there are not because Alok thinks that Georgiou being a tyrant would therefore be immune to torture. It's that the writers seem to think that. I am not an expert on history, to be sure, and I certainly do not know the sexual habits of every tyrant in history. However, I'd be willing to bet that Ivan the Terrible, Vlad the Impaler, Saddam Hussein, Pol Pot, Leopold II, Adolf Hitler, Joseph Stalin, and Genghis Khan were not all immune to torture. I swear, it's like the writers genuinely think that being a tyrant is a superpower.
How do you know so much about people like me? Hmm? You learned tyranny somewhere, and you learned hard.
Holy crap, they really do think being a tyrant is a superpower. My first thought when Georgiou said, "How do you know so much about people like me?" was, well, she's a former member of Section 31. She was a subject matter of this mission, so of course Alok would be briefed on her. However, the way that she says people like me, and the way that he says that torture wouldn't work on her because she's a real tyrant, and then she follows it up with that he must have experienced tyranny himself because he understands it so well, is absolutely mind-blowing. I mean, there's really no way they could make this scene any worse, right?
If you have to hide it, that's a weakness. And I can't have that in a partner.
We're not partners.
I don't even know what to say here. The writers seem hell-bent on trying to create some kind of tension between Georgiou and the rest of the Section 31 team. The problem is that them being terribly offended by what a bad girl Georgiou is just doesn't cut it if you know anything about Section 31. So I don't even know what the writers are thinking. Well, at least they're not going to say he's a tyrant and therefore has a superpower, right?
Whatever you believed your mission was, it's worse than you thought. Billions of lives are at stake and time is short.
Wait, what? I mean, Alok did just talk about what a horrible tyrant she is, and it's not like she's denying that or anything. And in fact, we saw, if you saw season 1 of Star Trek Discovery, Georgiou was so horrible. I mean, she was literally eating other sentient beings, not only when we first met her in Star Trek Discovery, but apparently earlier in this very same movie. So why does she care if billions of lives are in danger? She's slaughtered billions of lives. She doesn't give a crap about people. Why in the world is she concerned at all?
I'm not from this time either.
You might be thinking that the 3 red turds there are because of Alok's mysterious origins. But no, not at all. We'll get to that in a minute. The 3 red turds there are for one simple word: either. He said to Georgiou, "I am not from this time either," which of course suggests that he knows that Georgiou is not from this time. However, that would not only contradict the star date that we see at the beginning of this movie, but it even contradicts Control's own statement in her mission briefing at the beginning of this movie when she said,
"In 2257, she was brought to our universe and joined Section 31. But after a few years, we lost contact. Recently, Georgiou was spotted using an alias."
Notice that Control never says anything about an extended period of time that Georgiou was missing, only that after a few years, she disappeared. And recently, they found her on the wrong side of this border, which we talked about in an earlier episode of this review. There's no indication that Control had suspected that she was from any time other than the one that they are currently in, which, based on the star date, would be just a few years later than 2257. Now, if this show does indeed take place in the Lost Era, as we've talked about before, while that would explain why she is from a different time, it would not explain the incorrect stardate at the beginning of this movie, nor would it explain how Section 31 managed to get camera footage from the 32nd century of Giorgio stepping into Carl, aka the Guardian of Forever, since the only way they could have that footage would be for Giorgio to provide it herself, which obviously she didn't do, since they don't know that she came from the 32nd century. Or is it possible that when Alok said that I come from a different time as well, that he actually meant that he thought she was from the 32nd century as opposed to the 23rd century? Just how incompetent are these writers? It makes no The worst thing is, that's not even the worst part of this conversation. This is.
Was born on Earth, 20th century.
You were 350 years old.
So you might think that those are the three red turds for the looming secret about his origins. But no, we're not quite there yet. This is for Giorgio's mind-bendingly bad math. Why is it mind-bendingly bad? Because it doesn't work no matter when this show is supposed to take place. You see, the 20th century, generally speaking, is considered between the years 1900 and 1999. Now, here's the funny thing. Giorgio immediately assumed that he was about 350 years old when he said that he was born in the 20th century. Now, if he was born in the year 1900, well, that would make the current year at 350 years old 2250, which, interestingly enough, is just a couple of years shy from when she crossed over from the mirror universe. So it would kind of seem like she actually assumes that this guy was born prior to the Great Depression. But of course, I'm assuming Giorgio's not that stupid. Now, if we are to assume that he was born closer to the time of Noonien Singh, which in the original series was 1996, was when the Botany Bay was launched.
The Enterprise picked up the Botany Bay, lost in space, from the year 1996. Myself, the ship's company, in cryogenic freeze. 1996.
However, we do have that retconned in the much more recent Strange New Worlds, where we see that Khan is just a toddler in the 2020s, which means that if he was born in the 20th century, and of course the grand mystery that we're about to uncover is also true, he would have needed to be born right near the end of the century. But if he was born in the year 1999, well, when we add the 350 years to that, it would make the current year 2349, which is 5 years after the Enterprise C was destroyed in 2344. And by the way, what really is the icing on the cake is Alok's answer to her questioning him about his age.
Was born on Earth, 20th century.
You were 350 years old.
More or less.
Now, just to clarify, the expression more or less, according to Cambridge at least, means approximately, mostly, or nearly. In other words, it is that she's almost nailed it as far as his age, which would actually support the idea that he was born right at the end of the 20th century, probably after 1996, based on what we know of current Trek canon. In fact, it would seem more likely that he was born in the early 21st century than in the late 20th century, considering the fact that we know that thanks to Romulan incursions, as we learned in Strange New Worlds, the Khan incident was delayed at least 30 years.
My people have been slowing human progress.
You're here to kill Khan Noonien Singh. Why?
Whole temporal wars have been fought over the.
You're a Romulan from the future.
It's almost as if time itself is pushing back and events reinsert themselves, and all this was supposed to happen back in 1992, and I've been trapped here for 30 years trying to get my shot at him.
Gonna kill me?
So based on what we can see here, it looks like the progression of Khan was delayed at least from 1992 to this date. We also hear her say that she's been attempting to do this for 30 years, which means that in this timeline at least, this is what Khan would have looked like in 2022 or somewhere around that day. So that means that Alok would actually have to be significantly older than Khan in order for him to have been born in the 20th century, since it looks like this Khan is somewhere between 10 and 12 years old, which means that he was born somewhere between 2010 and 2012, at least in this particular timeline. Now, you may be saying at this point, geez, Salty, you're going into a lot of detail here with Khan and all that, just talking about Alok's birthday. But here's the kicker for all this. If we assume that Alok was born in 1999, the most likely year based on what we see of him and what we know of Khan, then that means that for this to be about 350 years later, that this show takes place around the year 2349, which is 5 years after the destruction of the Enterprise C, which happened in 2344. A starship in which one of these team members will someday in the future be captain of, because now she's only a lieutenant? That being said, I would not be surprised. The writing for this movie is so incompetent, so grossly negligent, that I would not be surprised at all if we were to find out that the reason that Rachel Garrett is a lieutenant in this movie, and this movie indeed takes place after the destruction of the Enterprise C, is that she was demoted after the destruction of the Enterprise C, even though we saw in yesterday's Enterprise that she died prior to the destruction of the Enterprise C. But quantum? Now, I was all set to give this the explanation of quantum, but frankly, I think that we can just chalk this up to bad writing.
She took me in, made me stronger than any human should be. She ripped me apart and turned me into another augment for her army.
You know what? F*** this show.
George, you and Alok sit for a while to talk many questions. We're asked, we know that she is from the future and learn that he is from the past. We learn that tyrants can resist torture as a general rule of thumb. Oh my god, I cannot believe that a show can be this dumb. I feel my brain cells dying. Deep down my soul is crying. It is clear that the writers were not even trying. I can't take any more. I am done singing this song. All I have left is to say thank you to my friends on Patreon. Jason Rogers, Sean Gacklon, Twinkle Teachies, Life Team Crystal, Laura Finney, Thomas Potts, Polk Sphere, York Tanow, Roll Hess Waked Up, Uchiha Daisuke, Firetail, T Stoney, Indie Tiger, Captain Fandom Nerd.